love sharing my classroom and my space with you guys. And we're taking a deep dive into how I went from an unhappy, stressed, and burnt out teacher to now working remotely and traveling the globe. And yes, this was me in 2022 crying in front of my class. I had just told them that I was leaving them and this was my last 2 weeks with them. I told my class it was because I had moved house and the drive to work was too long. I mean, I was driving an hour each way to work, but this was not the truth. In reality, I had had enough. Let's rewind a bit. In 2018, I opened up my own Teachers Pay Teachers store, and if you've never heard of it, it's an online platform where teachers can sell their digital resources. I created an Instagram page to show my resources and my life in the classroom. Over the next 5 years, I grew my platform. Then from 2020 onwards, a few things happened. In 2022, it was nearing the end of term 2, so we were about to go on school holidays and I was out for a cafe on a lunch break with a few of my colleagues, and I get a text message from my print team saying, "Hey Eden, when you get back from lunch, can we have a quick 10-minute meeting?" It was so out of the blue. I just knew in my gut something was wrong, and the whole drive back to work, I just felt ill. I knew something was wrong. I was so stressed. But I went into that meeting, we sat down, and they began to inform me that I can no longer share anything on social media about my classroom or anything that I do as a teacher. It pretty much came down to the department owns everything we do as teachers, and so I wasn't allowed to share it online anymore. I remember sitting in that meeting and just trying to hold everything in, just nodding my head and say, yep, that's fine, I'll shut it down, that's fine. And I walked out of that meeting and I immediately burst into tears. It was quite devastating to hear that something that I'd worked on for the last 5 years was just being taken away from me. After that meeting, I spent every day crying. I would go to work crying, I would come home from work crying. I was just a complete mess. And honestly, I think it was because it was just a buildup of all these things that had happened over the last few years that it became the straw that broke the camel's back. Partner at the time, and he's still my current partner, he's the one I'm traveling with at the moment, he sat me down and he said, "Eden, just quit. Take your business full time. You really love doing it, so just quit." And this honestly really lit a fire in my belly. It was all I suddenly had my mind focused on, and it was all I wanted to do. I'd really fallen out of love with teaching and that work environment, and so when we came back from school holidays, I sat down with my principal. I told him that I needed a break for my mental health, which he completely understood, so he offered me 18 months leave without pay, and I gladly took it, and it meant that I was finishing up in 2 weeks. So that's when I told my class, and that was probably honestly the hardest part about all of this, because they were hands down the best class I'd ever had. I was in my 6th year of teaching and I will miss that class so much. But I packed up my classroom and I left mid-year. For the rest of 2022, I worked on my business and did some relief teaching just to make some extra pay. But my partner and I knew that we were up to some adventure, and now that we both worked for ourselves and online, we thought, why not use this opportunity to travel? Our original plan was to do 6 months in Canada, 3 months in Mexico, and 3 months in the US. And that was our very vague plan. And I say vague because the only thing that we had done was booked our one-way ticket and our first month of accommodation. Let's just say we are very last-minute queens here. We are not very organized when it comes to traveling. On March 15th, 2023, we packed up our house and caught our first flight to Toronto. We had a great first month in Toronto. It's similar to Melbourne in that it's a city, but it has nice restaurants, cafes, parks, but there's not too much to actually do in the city. So it's an easy transition going from working at home to now working abroad and in a different city. We worked out of cafes, did some sightseeing, of course had to go do Niagara Falls, which I recommend spending the night if you're gonna do Niagara Falls, because Niagara at night is just stunning. However, when we were approaching month 2, my partner had to go back to Australia for his cousin's wedding for a little bit, and his birthday was approaching and I was gonna take him to the Bahamas. So we thought it thought it'd be easier to book another month in Toronto because I was going to be on my own for a bit and I felt more comfortable doing that in a city that I already knew. And also the flight from the Bahamas is only 3 hours from Toronto, so it just made sense. We got to the end of month 2 and our plan was to go to Montreal, but the weather was getting a little warmer and we were kind of craving some beach weather. And my partner's like, I need the beach. He's from Gold Coast, so need I say more. So with 3 days left before we had to check out of our accommodation, we booked a flight to Spain. Don't ask me how we just went from Canada to Spain. It just happened and it happened really fast, but I have zero regrets about it because we got to do a European summer for the next 3 months. The only issue is we had 4 luggage cases and we didn't really want to bring the extra luggage case because we weren't going to need our winter clothes on those cobblestone streets. So I found a Facebook page called Aussies in Canada and some lovely lady online offered to look after our extra luggage cases for the next 3 months. From Toronto, we did a mini little trip to Barcelona because that is one of the perks of working for yourself and working remotely. You can take little holidays when you want. From Barcelona, we went to Calahonda for the next 2 months. Being Aussie, I'm not the biggest fan of the rock beaches, but it was really nice being by the water. On our weekends, we did do some day trips to Midges and Marbella, which were really nice and involved a lot of sangria. From Calahonda, we caught a bus, which cost us €50, but it was a 10-hour bus ride to Lisbon. And honestly, I think next time I would just pay for the plane ticket. It was far too long to be on a bus. We spent our last month in Portugal and I absolutely loved Portugal. The food was so yum and everyone was so friendly. However, our visa was coming to an end and we needed to go pick up our luggage cases in Toronto, which meant on the 3rd of August we flew back for 2 nights to pick up our luggage case, but then went on to Calgary. Of course, on the flight out to Calgary, I had to get food poisoning the night before and a 10 out of 10 would never recommend that experience again. Having food poisoning and then having to get on an airplane is an experience I would recommend nobody does. We did spend a month in Calgary because our plan was to obviously go and do Banff, but in hindsight it was probably a little bit too long in this city. There's just not much to do in Calgary, so we spent that month doing a lot of work. On the 6th of September though, we switched off from work and spent the next 5 days doing a road trip around Jasper and Banff National Park. This place was absolutely stunning and I can share my itinerary with you guys if you'd like me to do a video about it, just comment down below. But some of the highlights were definitely driving through the Icefields Parkway, Lake Moraine at sunrise, and of course, all the wildlife. After our little road trip, my birthday was fast approaching and my partner wanted to surprise me for our next location. It was actually so sweet. He did so well trying to keep it a surprise for me. We had a layover in the US, so for the first part in Canada, I had no idea where we were going. And it was only because the guy at customs going through the US asked where we were heading that day that I did overhear it. But for my birthday, he took me to Aruba for a month. And this place is honestly heaven. One of my bucket list items has always been to swim with sea turtles, and we did this nearly every weekend that we were there in Aruba. This place has definitely been the highlight for me in all our travels throughout the year. Aruba has beautiful beaches and the friendliest locals. I mean, our Airbnb host, he only lived a few houses down from us, but he was just so helpful, so polite. I mean, he drove us to go pick up our rental car. He even dropped off a bottle of wine for us just because it had a kangaroo on it. One of the best things about this place is our Airbnb had snorkels, which meant that we could just get in our car and drive down to the beach and go swim with the turtles. Now, Aruba is a part of the Dutch Caribbean, and the island next to Aruba is called Curacao. We loved Aruba so much that we wanted to do it all over again. However, Aruba only had a 30-day visa, so we thought we'd go to Curacao to kind of get the same experience. Our next month in Curacao, it was like, I don't know, the universe had something against us. Our flight from Aruba to Curacao was a short 25 minutes. It was such a small plane that we didn't even have assigned seats. Like, it went 2 and then 1, so we were sitting in this little single row. We got off the airplane and at the airport we tried to organize a rental car, which I think we wasted 2 hours of our life because it was just really expensive, or they were messing us around with different cars. So in the end, we gave up. We were hot, hungry, tired, and we just headed to our Airbnb. We get there and we're informed that we have no power and they're not really sure when it's coming back on. Mind you, we're in the Caribbean. It is hot. This house is hot. So we are sweltering away and we have no data and there's no Wi-Fi because there's obviously no power. So we can't even find where the local shops are, because this is where I learnt my lesson to download the offline map before we get to our location. For hours, we're waiting around this house just hoping the power comes on. But let's just say the house is not the nicest. This house feels like one of those cabins that you rent when you're camping. Everything just feels kind of dirty. The bathroom stunk. The shower just had a tarp that went across and the water just goes all over the bathroom floor. The beds was so hard. It was like sleeping on a hardwood floor. And then there was the kitchen. The kitchen had mouse all throughout the cupboards, and like this was one of the chopping boards they expected us to use. I remember just looking at my partner being like, we can't stay here for a month. We were eventually able to check out and get a refund. After this whole experience, we're pretty tired, so we're like, why not go and treat ourselves? And we booked 2 nights in a really nice place. The place we booked was amazing, other than some very intimidating iguanas. But for the 2 nights that we're there, the fire alarm goes off. The first night it went off from 2 a.m. to 11 a.m. And the next night it went off at 3 a.m. till I think 7 a.m. We did not get any sleep and we felt awful. We're thinking surely at this point we're gonna catch some luck. So we drive to our next Airbnb, which is very remote. It's out in the national parks. And while the place is really nice and big, there are some drawbacks. We're not allowed to use the aircon during the day, otherwise we'll be charged an electricity fee. So we have 2 little fans to try and get us through, and it is so hot in this place. You can't open up the doors to let a nice breeze in because it's right next to a farm, so the bugs were just everywhere, and it's pretty remote, so it's pretty far from even just the supermarket, so doing grocery shopping was even just a whole task. After 3 weeks, I don't know how we survived this, but we knew that for Christmas we wanted to do New York, and when we were looking at just going from Curacao to the US, a lot of layovers were in Panama. We thought, why not do a month in Panama? As you guys can see, we are very last minute when it comes to our plans. We stayed in Panama City for the month, and honestly, I can see why so many digital nomads come to Panama. I really enjoyed our stay here, and it might have been because of where we'd come from, just being back in a city again, being close to shops. I really loved that. But there was also a lot to see in Panama. So obviously the canal, the old town, lots of amazing restaurants, but of course there is some sloth. So we were really enjoying just being back in the city life. We then finished up our work for the year, and on December 15th, we flew out to New York for 10 days. My partner and I have both done New York before, but never over Christmas. It's always been on my bucket list to see the Rockefeller tree, and in person it is 10 times better. We spent 10 days exploring, eating all the food, and of course doing all the Christmas markets. But then on Christmas Day we flew out to Mexico. So fast forward to now. I'm currently in Tulum after spending 2 weeks in Playa del Carmen. Mexico has been a really nice place to holiday, but it's been a little harder in terms of living here long term and remote work. It's just been those little luxuries, like being able to drink the water out of the tap, or all the places we were looking at didn't have washing machines, so we have to travel quite far to go do our laundry. We're also nowhere near the hotel zone here, which is kind of where all the big supermarkets are, so even going to go do grocery shopping during the week is a big task. So currently we've spent the last 10 months traveling and working. I was offered a job at the start of 2023 from another teacher resource creator, so I work as a VA for her. I've also pivoted away from teaching, and I also run my own business as a freelance graphic designer. But most importantly, throughout all of this, I can say I'm the happiest I've ever been. The digital nomad lifestyle gives me the flexibility that I've been craving when it comes to a work-life balance. I love my slow mornings, being by the beach and getting to experience so many different cultures, but most importantly, working my own hours. And that's not to say there aren't challenges. There are definitely challenges. But for the most part, I really do love my current lifestyle, because when I look back at all that I've been through, I'm so glad that I left and took the risk to go all in on my dreams. If you want to hear more about how I juggle my life now, traveling and working remotely, make sure that you go ahead and check out this video.